We're tackling a tough but important topic today: what to do when your child sees something inappropriate online. Whether they stumbled across it by accident or went looking for it on purpose, we've got practical advice to help you navigate the conversation, protect them moving forward, and even turn this into a learning opportunity. Because the truth is, exposure to explicit content is happening younger than most parents realize, and being prepared can make all the difference.
We know that explicit content is a thing that kids are, at some point, they're going to encounter it online.
Right.
Whether that's on their own devices or it's shared via, they're seeing it on someone else's device, on the school bus, whatever it might be. And you mentioned, whether kids see it intentionally, if they're seeking it out, or if they just happen to stumble upon it because it is very easy to do. How can parents approach those conversations between intentionally seeking it out and then also, it just happened?
If we had to choose one word for parents to kind of simmer on right now, and it's shame. And I hope you're not thinking we should shame kids, because that's not what I mean by that. In fact, we should work to eliminate the shame. There is no shame. There's no shame for age-appropriate sexual curiosity. There's no shame whether you accidentally stumbled across it, because how are you going to avoid it? It's the internet and It's everywhere. And there's no shame for wanting to seek out information about the human body, right? Whether it's scientific or for pleasure, etc. So we've got to work to remove the shame. Children do not need to be afraid if they have encountered this content or when they go to look for this content, but they do need to be educated and comforted. They need to be educated that it can harm them, and not harm them like when they, get cut or fall off a bike, but it can hurt their hearts and their minds, and it can hurt their ability to have healthy consensual relationships when it's time. It can hurt their ability to be happy and fulfilled in those relationships, because a lot of times it can turn into an addiction. It is a real addiction, pornography addiction, and it's really sad. It's sad for everybody involved. And again, there's so much shame and stigma attached to that, and we need to work to remove that. We need to comfort our children and help them know that if they're going to access anything with a screen, there's a chance that they're going to stumble across something that might be scary, confusing, exciting, entertaining. And none of those things are their fault, but we need to talk about it and make sure that they are experiencing screen-based interactions in a safe and uplifting way. And then I guess finally, from the more severe cases, because we know that 8-year-olds are addicted to pornography, and because we know children can be harmed, they can essentially be abused, sexually abused, without ever having been in the same room as their abuser. If you have discovered that your child is really interacting with this content a lot, or there's an adult or a peer that's sending them graphic content, it's probably time for you to reach out to your child's pediatrician, therapist, potentially law enforcement. And again, you as the parent don't need to feel shame because this happened to your kid. It can happen to anyone.
Yeah. And I think that that's important for parents to understand, is that it's not just a solo kid issue. This is happening, this is happening to kids of all ages, way younger than you would think. And, in 2024, from our annual report, 63% of tweens and 77% of teens encountered nudity or content of a sexual nature.
Yeah.
Those are big numbers.
It's not small numbers.
And then in that same vein, with predators, 4% of tweens and 7% of teens encountered predatory behaviors from someone online. And, those sorts of relationships can come from kids seeking out this content, or maybe they do stumble upon it and then they do form some sort of an addiction to it. And predators will absolutely take advantage of that.
And it might just be your child innocently playing Roblox, which we'll talk about in another podcast. And they're just trying to have fun and create and explore. And the predators know that there are kids there, and they try to communicate with them, and then try to move that conversation off to a different platform like WhatsApp or Signal or Kik that is end-to-end encrypted and cannot be as protected.
Right. There's probably a handful of things that parents should know when it comes to porn and their kids seeing that content. If you had to give just like some quick high-level bullets of things that parents should be aware of, what might you share?
Yeah, I would share to first just think back to your childhood. When was the first time you came across this sort of thing? I know for me, it was around first grade. I was at a friend's house. We were playing in their neighborhood, super safe place, safe family. Everybody was great. But we met up with some neighborhood kids, and the neighborhood kids were like, come here. And, asked us to come in the house and went up to the parents' room and showed us a magazine they had found under their parents' bed. And that was the first time I saw a lot, a whole lot. And I, had a lot of questions. I knew it wasn't normal.
Right.
I knew it wasn't something that like should be living on the coffee table in the living room, right? It's like I knew that there was some sort of like illicitness to it, if that's even the right word. But I also certainly didn't go home and tell my mom,
right?
Like, hey, this is what I saw today. What is it? What should I do about it? Right? I was afraid that I would get in trouble, or I was afraid that I'd never be able to play with that friend again or in that neighborhood again, right?
Yep.
So, and that was 1986. No smartphones, no smart TVs, no publicly available internet.
Right.
So, long-winded way to say, what you need to know as a parent is your child will see explicit sexual content much younger than you might think, which is why you need to be their source of information so that they're not afraid to talk to you and let you know when that happens. Even if you block it on their phone, even if you have the filters, other people are not as proactive and safe as you are. So they're going to encounter it somewhere. It's just that prolific. I want parents to know that it's not just something that is appealing to boys. Girls are also watching it, addicted to it, encountering it too. It's not just a boy thing.
Right.
And children are addicted to pornography. Ask any child psychologist, therapist, what they've seen. It will surprise you. And I guess, I think we do a good job of being really middle of the road, non-judgmental here. Like, Bark Technologies is a non-religious, bipartisan, like we're a for-profit company that has a lot of give back, but we help to protect all kids.
Right.
Kids in Christian families, kids in atheist families, kids in Muslim families, kids in Jewish families, kids with all kinds of different boundaries, right? So when we talk about this, it's not a it's not a religious thing, although I certainly understand that aspect of it as somebody who personally would say, she's a Christian. But just when we're talking about the intellectual and emotional and mental health aspects of watching, consuming pornography, it has lasting effects on humans' emotional and physical well-being. I'm not saying this to shame anybody who works in this industry.
Right.
I have a lot of compassion for you if that's your line of work, because honestly, I wonder if you're there by choice. I know a lot of people aren't. But look at the science, and there's a bunch of resources. We'll probably cover this, but one of my favorite is Fight the New Drug, ftnd.org or fightthenewdrug.org. They will go over the issue. And I'm quoting directly from their site. Decades of studies from respected institutions have demonstrated significant impacts of porn consumption for individuals, relationships, and society. They say that 73% of teens have seen it. Most kids today are exposed to it by 13. And here's where we get into more of the nitty gritty. At least 1 in 3 porn videos show sexual violence or aggression. And that's something that we saw in Childhood 2.0. One of the young women, a high school girl, interviewed for the documentary, which you should see free on YouTube, says that more and more boys, in her case, are sexually aggressive, which was not something that was very prevalent, when I was growing up, at least.
Right.
I could go on and on and on. Again, according to Fight the New Drug, porn consumers tend to be less satisfied in relationships, less committed, more permissive cheating. Exploitation and trafficking are common experiences in the porn industry. Anyway, fightthenewdrug.org has a list of all the facts. And if you feel so inclined to, get involved to help educate and advocate for healthy, consensual relationships, because there's nothing wrong with sex. We would not be here if our parents did not do that, right? So sex is good, but non-consensual sex and video and image-based portrayals of it in front of children is not healthy for their growth and development.
Not at all. And I think to your point, it sets unrealistic expectations, the whole aggressive behavior behind some of it. Because they're watching it and seeing it, they're like, this is just how it works. And they're not, their brains aren't developed well enough to know that that's not how it works. It's sad that kids are seeing this. I remember the first time I saw it, and I don't even remember how old I was, but it was young. And I was just like, what?
Right.
And it's actually, unfortunately, something that still graphically is in my head. And I wish it would go away. But just knowing the access that they have to it and how much they're online and how much they might be seeing of it is it's sad.
Gosh, you reminded me of another instance. It was, I think, sixth or seventh grade. Amazing school. Loved the school I went to. Loved the community. But we went on a field trip. We went to Chattanooga, and our hotel room just happened to have access to HBO, which the school probably didn't know about.
Right.
Right. And they had this whole series called Real Sex, and the things that I saw as a 6th, 7th grader in a room with my other 6th, 7th grade friends,
yeah,
I was like, what?
Yeah.
What? Wow.
Yeah.
So you can't keep your kids in a bubble.
No, you can't.
Another thing I want to just say, as you were talking, there's so many good quotes that stick with me, or so many powerful quotes that stick with me from Childhood 2.0, but one of them comes from our dear friend Chris McKenna of ProtectYoungEyes.com, and he says, what they see, they meaning children, what they see, they feel neurologically compelled to do, meaning when children are watching this sort of thing, as children normally do in developmentally understandable ways, they act out what they see. If they watch a pirate movie, they want to pretend and play pirates on the playground. Well, if they see pornography, that's a different story.
Yeah, Chris always has such a good way of putting things into perspective and making parents, caregivers, guardians realize just the power that the little, I think he calls them supercomputers, the phones, what all they are capable of accessing and seeing because we've just handed them these devices.
Yeah.
Without thinking twice about it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think now people are thinking much more about it,
yes,
thankfully.
If you are listening to this or watching this, you are, unfortunately, in a minority of people who are actually waking up to what's really happening with kids. Right. And let's try to change that, right? Let's try to flip that narrative and make sure everybody knows what's happening with kids so we can help them have a healthy childhood.
Yes. Absolutely. We mentioned that they will, as crazy as this seems, they will stumble upon it. What are some unexpected places that kids are coming across this sort of content that might surprise parents?
Dude, or as the kids say, bro. We actually posted an Instagram reel recently that went pretty viral about the ability for children to use Google or Apple Maps to look up let's say, places of business that cater towards adults wanting to engage in, sexual activities.
Right.
And it leads them down very, very explicit rabbit holes very quickly. So yeah, Google Maps, Apple Maps, not safe for work, not safe for kids.
And not an app that you would think you need to be concerned about.
No.
Like, it's just, I remember when I can't remember who I was telling that about. They were like, no way.
What?
And I'm like, no, it's for real.
Yeah.
And kids are doing that.
Yeah.
Because they're smart. And they do know, stumbling upon it, yes, but they are smart in how they access things. And, this is something we've talked about before. Kids are smarter than their parents with text most times. And so it's something to be cautious of. And I think that's a great point that, parents educating themselves is the first step in making sure that kids are safer and, more protected.
Yeah. Get your head out of the sand. Even if it is the most uncomfortable topic for you in the world, you've got to get over it.
Right.
You've got to talk to your kids, unless you want the internet or other people talking to your kids about it.
Yep.
If you're that uncomfortable, that's your problem.
Right. Obviously, there's content restrictions or, content's being moderated on all these different platforms. But places like Meta sometimes don't stop your kids from seeing that type of content because, an example is, if they are technically wearing clothes, they can still have these images on their platforms. What are the types of scenarios where that might be how your kids come across content like that?
I mean, we don't have enough time to go over all the ways in which content creators circumvent filters, algorithms, etc. But we'll give you some examples.
Yeah.
And also keep in mind that if platforms like Meta, which is Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, etc., and Snapchat and YouTube, if they don't know your child's real age, if they think your child is actually 18 plus, then these don't even apply.
Yeah.
Right? So kids lie about their age. That's one way they encounter inappropriate content.
Yep.
Or if they go to certain websites like Pornhub and tell Pornhub that they are 18 or 21 or whatever it is, depending on the state, like, they're not asking you to upload your ID and verify, right? They're just saying, okay.
It's like when you go to totalwine.com and you're like, I'm over the age of 21, like just to look at wine. Like, there's no verification.
Stupid. It's so stupid. So there's that. Also, something that shocked me recently, and I'm in this space, there are certain things that influencers will do, like they will be nude, but they will be off camera. But their reflection will be projected via, let's say, a shower door or glass. And that's what will make it onto the internet. And then the algorithm doesn't pick that up.
Right.
But you can see everything.
Yeah.
Let's talk about ads. There's ads for toys, for adult toys. Some of them don't look like body parts, but then a lot of them do.
Yeah. I feel like you talked about this. This was years ago, but like Etsy.
You're in my brain.
Yeah.
You're in my brain.
I remember when you told me about that there's just listings for explicit things just there.
Well, let's go there for a minute.
Yeah.
And, shout out to Etsy because they removed this, or at least did their best to remove it. So thank you, Etsy, for listening to the general public. And thanks to the efforts of NCOSE, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. But Etsy used to sell dolls that looked like children that people would buy for very bad purposes.
It's insane.
Or body parts. And they used to sell those things. Now, Etsy is not the place you think to go for that sort of thing, right? I just got a really cool handmade blanket from there, right? But there's other things there too.
Yeah.
So just be aware. The internet is full of this sort of stuff. And I mean, we could go on and on, but like, I remember back in the day, like getting an email from Victoria's Secret. And to me, that's like benign.
Right.
But somebody might not want their second grader,
see that.
Signing up for that.
Right.
So there's that.
Yeah. Just think about it. What are some other takeaways that parents can take from this episode, in regards to their kids seeing explicit content? Like a little bit of advice.
Yeah. Fire round. Is that what it's called? Fire round?
Like a rapid fire?
Rapid fire. Just quick recap.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of if but when.
Mm.
Your personal issues and shame and stigma around this, don't make those your kids, right? You can start with just calling body parts their actual anatomical names,
Yep.
right? You don't have to have cutesy names for body parts. Like, call them what they are. It's what they are.
Yep.
And get your head out of the sand. Lean on resources like, in addition to this podcast, protectyoungeyes.com, Chris McKenna, Fight the New Drug. There's a wonderful book you can get anywhere books are sold, including Amazon, called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures for kids 7 to 12. Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior for kids 3 to 6 will help you talk to your child in an age-appropriate way about this sort of content. Reach out to your child's pediatrician, your child's school counselor. There are so many ways to help you have this conversation with your kid. And it's not just a conversation, it's multiple conversations over their childhood, but you've got to have these conversations. Another thing that I want you to know is that sexting is the new first base. Kids are sexting, whether you want to believe it or not. And it's also against the law. In some cases, in some states, it's a felony. And so one of the things that I really, really appreciate about Bark and our engineering team and our Bark smartphone is that we built it such that if a child goes to take a nude photo or video with their Bark phone of themselves or someone else, it's not going to save it to the device. We can't say the same thing about an iPhone.
Nope.
Or a non-Bark Android.
Right.
So Bark is helping to stop the facilitation and distribution of CSAM, child sex abuse material. So really grateful for that advancement in technology, and shout out to the Bark engineering team.
Yeah, that's huge. And not to, hate on iPhone any more than we tend to. But I mean, on an iPhone, the kid literally has the ability to be like, oh, I would actually like to see that. Like, they blur it and they tell you what it is. So obviously the kid's not going to be like, nah.
I'll pass.
Yeah.
Not interested.
Yeah.
I mean, some strong, mature kids will, but like,
that's not the likelihood.
Not the likelihood.
Right.
And you brought it up, so I'm going to go there. Apple has the ability to block CSAM from even being uploaded to the cloud, but they decided not to do that. They were going to do that. They decided not to do that. Apple prioritizes privacy over child safety. I love Apple for so many reasons. I'm looking at my MacBook Air, wearing my Apple Watch. I have my iPhone right beside me, but I'm an adult. Apple needs to do better, and Apple needs to prioritize child safety over the privacy rights of predators.
Right.
Just period.
Point blank. Anything else that you want to add when it comes to explicit content?
Please don't punish your child. Please, please, please do not punish your child, because that's just going to add to the shame. It's going to, I think, encourage them to just hide it from you. The more you can be like, hey, I get it. If they're really seeking this content, like, I get it. It's addictive.
Right.
It's lighting up the pleasure center of your brain, much like sugar or alcohol for alcoholics. There's a biological driver that's pushing you to want to consume more and more of this, which is why you're not in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong per se, but we've got to help you dial it back.
Right.
We've got to protect your brain and protect your heart so you can have a healthy relationship when it's time and when you're ready.
Love it.
If you found this episode helpful or enlightening, we would love to hear if this inspired you to have a conversation with your child earlier than you might think, because honestly, it gives us the motivation and encouragement to keep going. These are not easy things to talk about, but we must talk about it.